Welcome to the Humorism Evening Podcast, the official podcast of the Humorism newsletter. I am your host, Seth Simons, author of the Humorism newsletter. It is currently Tuesday, May 26th, a little after 7 p.m. This episode will release on Thursday, May 28th. It is now a Thursday-based podcast that you will receive on Thursdays, whereas previously it was a Monday-based podcast. Hopefully this doesn't freak you out. It is a warm day here in Brooklyn after a couple rainy days here in Brooklyn. What's been going on? What's been going on in the world? I'll tell you what's been going on in the world. I've got some good content lined up for the Humorism newsletter. We're going to do an interview series that will launch soon with funny and interesting people about their favorite funny things, sketches, videos, comics, friends, books, essays, stories, the works. Pretty light but fun stuff. I think it'll be good. I have some good people lined up. I'm not going to tell you who they are in case some of them end up not working out for whatever reason. Then it will be pretty embarrassing of me to have promised them to you and then it doesn't happen. But I think you'll like what's coming up. I think it'll be good. I think hopefully it'll be a little shareable. Maybe it'll be some shareable content and a nice break from, all of the horrors, all of the horrible stuff that's going on. What else has been going on? I'll tell you what else has been going on. There's a profile in Variety of Marlon Wayans. We all know and love the comedian Marlon Wayans, where he defended his friendship with Dave Chappelle, which he was asked to speak to because the profile is also about his trans son. So, a bit interesting to be friends with one of comedy's and the world's biggest transphobes in the same, breath that you're talking about how wonderful it is to have and support your trans child and to love them unconditionally. The dog is rifling through a bag. He shouldn't be doing that, but that's okay. It's all love here in my apartment. Go to your crate, please. Thank you. Off he goes. Okay, so I'm going to read you this little bit from the profile in Variety of Marlon Wayans. No, go in your crate. You heard me. He wanted to go on my bed, but I don't want him on my bed right now. All right, here we go. Here's the profile in Variety of Marlon Wayans, beginning right now. Quote, "All of my kids are gifts, and our love is the wrapping paper. I'm not here for hate. Transphobia is a form of hate. Homophobia is a form of hate. Racism is a form of hate. All those small-hearted, small-minded people, there's a hell for you. And if you think you're going to bully my child, go somewhere else. It's not going to happen. I won't stand for it." End quote. Good, inspiring words from Marlon Wayans. Let's continue reading. I ask him how he negotiates his good friendship with Chappelle and having a transgender child, given the heavy backlash the comedian's received for his jokes in his recent Netflix comedy specials aimed at the trans community. Jokes that led to a walkout by Netflix employees who felt that the material was transphobic. Quote, "I wouldn't hang with Dave if he was full of hate. I don't hang with people like that," end quote, Wayans maintains. Quote, "I know Dave's heart, and his intention isn't to punch down. Dave wants to freely tell his jokes. And if you're going to be anti-comedy, then he's going to keep attacking you until you learn to have a sense of humor. He's just standing there and defending his front line as a comedian," end quote. As Wayans sees it, Chappelle was locked in a bitter censorship war with his detractors and had dug in his heels, refusing to cede any ground for the sake of comedy. Nobody was going to tell Chappelle who he could and couldn't joke about, and Wayans says, quote, "You have to be a comedian to understand that," end quote. Sure, buddy. Oh, actually, back into the quote. "As a comedian, I respect his journey, and as a friend, I respect his journey, and for my child, I respect their journey, and as the father of my child, I can appropriate my feelings toward my friend and my feelings toward my child and how we put those two things together, and I can explain both sides. I'm between them, so I can explain both sides to each other," end quote. It's too bad. It's really too bad that in order to be a comedian, in order to have a career in comedy, you apparently have to be able to metabolize and rationalize and excuse acts of straightforward evil, I think, because it would be interesting. It would be interesting to see people in his position earnestly try to reckon with the fact that the most famous guy in their industry has acted with hate, has acted with what is obviously and undeniably hate in his heart. He got up and said, "I'm a TERF." That's what he said. You don't need to really do anything but watch his comedy specials and watch his jokes and read the article about him chewing out a group of school children who didn't like what he said about trans people. You need only watch his own material to see that he has hate in his heart. And it would be interesting, I think, for someone like Marlon Wayans or any other comedian who has defended Chappelle, Patton Oswalt, for instance, to consider what it means that their friend, that their hero, that this guy who basically runs so much of their industry has hate in his heart and is also a good pal, a good hang. What would that mean to like someone, to really like them and think they're funny, but for them to also be very hateful and vindictive and intolerant? Wouldn't that be the stuff that we would like to see our artists deal with in public instead of just saying, no, he's not. It doesn't mean anything. It's just jokes. It's just comedy. He's just digging in his heels against his detractors. Why are they his detractors? Why are they detracting? Is there context to all of this that informs the nature of his digging in of his heels? No, I guess there isn't. It's just a totally neutral thing, fighting censorship. And that's the other thing that gets me. And I think I've said this before, but the pro-comedy position, if you like comedy, if you love comedy, if you believe in comedy, if you think comedy is an art form that matters, the pro-comedy position is that jokes targeting trans people harm trans people, because comedy is a powerful thing. It is not nothing. It is not words containing vacuums. It is words containing ideology and containing emotion and feeling. And it's words that skip past the rational part of our brains to the irrational part of our bodies. And they change us and they make us think differently without even realizing we're thinking differently. Or they give us permission to feel the things that we otherwise didn't feel we could feel publicly, that we felt we had to repress. That's what it does. And it's good that it has the power to do that. And it's why comedians are an important part of our culture. And it's why they should face criticism when they use their power for hate, in my opinion. But you don't need me to convince you of that. It reminds me too of there is continuing discourse. You'll be shocked to hear that there is continuing discourse over the roast of Kevin Hart on Netflix a few weeks ago. All these parties are sniping back and forth at each other. Shane Gillis had Cheryl Underwood on his podcast. They're buddies. Kevin Hart went on the what do you call it? The Breakfast Club, Charlemagne the God's radio show, and said he didn't mind what Tony Hinchcliffe and all the others said. You know, there's nothing wrong with their racist jokes. It's all in love. It's bad taste, yes, but it's a roast. And I think this is sort of an idea that I see go around, that the racist jokes told in the context of the roast aren't bad, because a roast is where anything goes. It's no holds barred. You can say whatever you want, and it's ... various intermediary steps here ... fine. And again, I think that's something I don't probably need to argue to you. It makes no sense. But I do think, one, the generous interpretation of that, I think, which I will generously say makes sense, is that a roast is a space where people who are friends get together and consent to be mean-spirited, because they know that they don't actually intend it, and it's all in the sake of fun. I think that is sort of the spirit of a roast, and I think it makes sense. I think I said mean-spirited when I just meant to say mean, because it's not mean-spirited. They're being mean, but it's with good spirits. Anyways, I think that is a sensible interpretation, a sensible institution. The problem is, one, obviously, these people, at least in the Netflix roast and in other recent roasts, aren't all friends, and they're not really acting in good faith. That's quite clear from a lot of the fallout and the backlash. Two, how convenient for all of the comedians who are actually racists, demonstrably racists, to have a space where it is okay to indulge the worst of their racism. How convenient for them. That they can do that there, and it doesn't actually count. Three, this is what all these people say about comedy, period, that it is a space where you can say whatever you want and it doesn't matter. It's just comedy. It's just jokes. So it's sort of hard from that starting place to then go and be like, oh yes, well, the roast is fine. The roast is where it actually doesn't count. No, I don't think so. The other thing is that it is just the nature of racist jokes or any sort of joke based on bigotry or stereotype that you're necessarily dealing with people who aren't in the room. A racist joke about Kevin Hart isn't just about Kevin Hart. A joke about Chelsea Handler being a murderer because she's had abortions isn't just about Chelsea Handler. You know, the simple fact of how language works is that you are invoking more than what is right in front of you. You are speaking in history and in contexts, social contexts that give meaning and power to your words. So I put little faith or little stock in Kevin Hart saying, well, I don't mind about the George Floyd joke. Who gives a shit if you don't mind about it? It's not about you. George Floyd wasn't there. I mean, that's sort of that joke is its own case because couldn't consent to it. But the whole thing, I think, is the same deal, and that goes for, I guess, I'm saying things about the roast that I think apply to pretty much all comedy. All these guys would rather not have to deal with the fact that millions of people are hearing what they say, even though they want millions of people to hear what they say. It's a lot of paradoxes in this thing. But let that be, hopefully, the last that I ever have to say about the Roast of Kevin Hart at the Netflix is a Joke Festival. Okay, there is one other thing I'd like to talk about, and then I really must get going to my friend Graham's birthday party. Happy birthday, Graham, friend of the newsletter, friend of the podcast, friend of me, Seth. And the thing I want to talk about is this nonfiction book I'm trying to sell. I've been trying to sell a nonfiction book about comedy, which means I've been working on a book proposal. I actually started working on it, I guess, a year ago, last summer. I talked to some of you about it. You perhaps remember the email I sent about it, soliciting sources, honestly. Then I took a long break for my second year of grad school, in which I wrote sort of a completely separate book, a poetry manuscript, which I'm also trying to sell. And I'll tell you how you sell a poetry manuscript these days. You don't. You don't sell it. You just submit it to a million different contests and hopefully win one of them. It makes a lot of sense. Anyways, in the last few months, I have resumed working on this book proposal in earnest, querying agents, trying to get representation, having conversations with agents about it, getting feedback. I think I probably need to change the scope and structure and concept a little bit, but I want to tell you about it, and maybe you can tell me what you think. You can tell me if you think I'm crazy, or if it's a good idea, or if there's one obvious thing that I am missing. But yeah, right now it's called, and this is liable to change, it's called Quitting Comedy, and it's a history of the comedy boom of the 2010s, which, as we all know, was supposed to be this artistic golden age where previously underrepresented voices, women, queer comedians, comedians of color, just sort of plain weird comedians who otherwise would not have been able to enter the mainstream through the very old-fashioned club system, could enter the mainstream thanks to all sorts of, new media, social media, the improv industrial complex, all these systems that we all know and love and that I've written about in the newsletter for many years. It was this period of great flourishing, and then it all sort of came to a bust. My theory is, as I've articulated again and again on the newsletter, is that COVID, the pandemic, sort of blew everything up. It sort of exposed the house of cards that so many of the institutions underpinning the comedy boom really were. UCB, Funny or Die, College Humor. I guess College Humor has made a comeback, but a lot of, the whole improv industrial complex and the digital comedy complex fell apart. And Comedy Central basically isn't a thing anymore. Netflix has stopped mostly investing in new stand-up. The whole ecosystem is now dominated by the people that the comedy boom was supposed to give us an alternative to. All of, the fascists and the racists and the just horrible stand-up podcasters that, to use a phrase I've used, I think twice already in this anecdote, we know and love. So the idea of the book is to track the rise and fall of the comedy boom. And the hope, the idea, is to do it through these stories of people who quit comedy for whatever reason. People who couldn't work for free at UCB for endless years as the pipeline to better jobs fell apart. People who couldn't, or not necessarily couldn't, but decided they no longer wished to put up with the rampant sexual harassment and racism and inaccessibility of stand-up comedy. The people who went and interned or were PAs at SNL and got burnt out from working in late night for years and years. These people, as I've written before, I think are a very important and underappreciated window into the structural workings of comedy and TV, that you don't really get their stories because so much history of American pop culture is through the eyes of famous people. It's through the eyes of the victors. So I think it is important to invert that trend, to invert that mode of storytelling and look at the comedy boom through the other side. And it's also about, it's about American life. The promise of the 2010s was progressivism, and then that promise did not come to fruition in the 2020s. There was the age of the supposed progressivism, and then there was the white backlash against all of that we are in now, the horrible, horrible times we are in now. So it seems to me that the story of comedy in the 2010s is the story of everyone, of American life. The hope, too, is that it's about more than just comedy. It's about what it means to work, what it means to have a dream, what it means to pursue that dream and find out, there's my dog, and find out that the reality isn't what you thought it would be. I think there's a lot in there. And my thinking is to divide it into 4 sections. Those 4 sections being: 1, the improv industrial complex; 2, the stand-up complex; 3, digital comedy, e.g., Funny or Die, College Humor, The Onion, that whole world that for a time offered a nice middle-class living to comedy workers. And then number 4, section 4, is TV, mostly focusing on late night and SNL. And of course, they're all interconnected. They all cross-pollinate. They all feed each other. And I know that there are I know there are nuances and exceptions to the general theory I have elucidated of the rise and fall of the comedy boom. But I think the general idea is true and worth getting into in a book-length work. The problem I've run into chatting with agents is it's not really a problem. It's just what they've told me, is that the dog is next to me curling up on the couch. I'll allow it. I will allow him to curl up on the couch as long as he doesn't make too much noise. He has to dig a little hole in the couch so that he can feel safe and sound. Just lie down. Can you just please lie down? Please hold for sound. Okay, go back to crate. Enough of this. I can't be expected to put up with these conditions. I'm a diva. I'm kind of a diva of a podcaster. Anyways, the feedback that I've gotten, which I think makes sense, although I wish it weren't so, is one that people sort of aren't going to read, or at least they're not going to buy a book about how toxic and bad the comedy business is. If they already agree with me, if they already agree that it's toxic and bad, they're not going to buy a book about how toxic and bad it is. If they don't think it's toxic and bad, if they like all of these comics that I criticize, then they're also not going to buy a book about how toxic and bad the people that they like are. That does seem to make sense to me, although I think it must be possible to appeal to a nostalgia for the 2010s, for the comedy and the art of the 2010s, which was pretty good. I'm not going to lie. I think it was pretty good. And although I think there's a lot of good comedy and TV and art now, I don't think it's as good. Maybe that's kind of boomerish of me. Maybe I'm being boomerish when I say that. But I think it is objectively the case that comedy has been worse off for the changes of the last, is it 2026, of the last 6 odd years. And I think there must be a nostalgia, a longing for the old days of 10 years ago that could be appealed to. The other piece of feedback I have gotten is this is a tougher one for me, is that it hurts the book that it's not about famous people. You want to be able to market it toward a fan base, ideally, and there aren't really any fan bases for people who have quit comedy. That seems true to me again. I can't really argue with that. I still think the stories of the quitters are worth telling. I think it is worth telling the stories of people on the margins of an industry, of a cultural space, as I've said before, because I guess it's not exactly the margins. It's just, most people are ordinary. Most people aren't famous. Most people toil away in obscurity. That's where basically all of the interesting stuff, not all of it, that's where a lot of interesting stuff happens. It's where most people are. And I believe those stories are worth telling. Still, it seems to me that I will have to find some way to have my cake and eat it too. I actually don't know if that expression applies, but I think I will have to find some way to maybe hang the narrative on famous people while still threading these stories in between and among them. The problem for me, of course, is that I don't have access to a lot of famous people because I write quite critically about famous people. But perhaps, given that famous people are public figures, there will be some whose stories I can reconstruct from the public record without having to get access to them. My current thinking that I've been tooling around with is, Mark Maron and Joe Rogan both started podcasting in 2009 and obviously went in very different directions. And so much of the story of the last, I don't want to do light math right now, but the story of the last however many years can be tracked through their stories. So maybe there's something that I can do with that. I'll have to see. Or maybe the thing to do is to just write a much more narrowly focused book about the rise and fall of UCB, which does have a fan base built in that one could appeal to. And I think there are many interesting stories to tell about UCB. And more broadly, the hope here is to find a space for all of the people who have emailed or DM'd me over the years with their own stories about working in comedy that I haven't necessarily always been able to find a platform for, but that I think are interesting and important and deserve to get told. It is an interesting industry. I think it is an interesting and important industry that informs the rest of our culture and social life in so many ways that are underappreciated. So I hope that I can find a way to do it that is both marketable and commercial, but also what I want it to be, which is an inversion of the way cultural histories traditionally get told, pop cultural histories, I mean, through the eyes of the famous and successful. I don't want to tell the stories of the famous and successful. I don't think they're the most important stories. So we'll see what happens. Maybe you have thoughts about that you are welcome to send me if you think there's something obvious I'm missing or something that would be good to look into. I, of course, always welcome your emails. And I think that's all I have for today. Stay tuned to the Humorism newsletter for more exciting content coming soon. And of course, the podcast will return next Thursday, because we are now a Thursday-based podcast. Thank you, as always, for listening, and hope to hear from you soon. End of podcast.